Hi, and welcome to the Quick and Dirty Romance Podcasts. We're your hosts. I'm Skye McDonald, author of Not Suitable for Work and Off the Record.
And I'm Sarah Smith, author of Faker. Each episode will dive deep into what it's like to be a contemporary romance author. We'll talk writing inspiration, give you the inside scoop about the publishing world, chat about how we write those infamous sex scenes, and more. And then we'll pull out and wrap it up in 30 minutes or less. But we promise to leave you satisfied.
And speaking of satisfied, put on your headphones and try not to blush, because this episode is all about sex. We've been promising to get to the topic, so here we go. So I'm going to start at the very beginning and tell you right off the bat that I do not come from a family where sex is discussed ever. Certainly not at the dinner table, not ever. I'm telling you, when I was growing up, if there was a TV show and there was too many sex jokes in it, Mom would turn it off. It was not a thing that we talked about. It was not a thing that happened. Babies just came from love, okay? So before we get into it, I just want you to know that that's my background on sex, and I basically learned everything from conversations with my friends. So I learned a lot of misinformation before I got started. But yeah. That is where I'm coming from with this.
Yeah, so I come from a very similar background. I wouldn't say that like my family is repressed or anything like that, but I would say that we didn't just openly talk about sex. And when we did, it was about like how you could get pregnant or how you could get an STD. It was never really about like, oh, this is supposed to be pleasurable or, satisfaction type stuff. So it was really not talked about. And I'm the same way. Like my friends and I were the ones who like talked about it. So yes, I think we come from a very similar background, Skye, when it comes to family attitudes on sex.
It sounds like it. I mean, my family, I love there's the show Arrested Development is one of my favorites. And there's this whole joke in there about never nudes. So like the idea of like never, ever having your clothes off even when you're showering. I think that if my mom had had her way, hi mom, I love you. That would basically be where we are. But absolutely. And so it's interesting because both of us have steamy novels, and we're going to get to the point where we talk about how we actually write those. But, I guess on top of that, it's interesting because I do love romance stories. And quite frankly, I like me a good steamy romance. So having come from that background, I don't know if it's because of that or in spite of that. But yeah, no, I do love a good steamy romance. That is my preferred taste in the genre.
I'm the exact same way. That's probably why we get along so well. Beta for each other. But yeah, like I probably would say that there's a reason for that. And that was because when I was younger, like a kid and a teenager, we just didn't talk about it. So like I just developed this natural curiosity about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like I say in my author bio, I was like sneaking romance novels from my auntie's stash and reading them as a kid because we just didn't talk about it. So here was this thing, this like really naughty act that was very intriguing to me as a kid, and nobody would talk to me about it.
Uh-huh.
So I would just like go read about it in my closet with my auntie's romance novels. And then like, then in real life, I'd be really freaked out about it because I thought like I'll get pregnant or I'll get an STD. So that wasn't the greatest bringing, but obviously I worked that out in my personal life and I'm fine now. I have like a normal, healthy understanding of sex, but yes, like I prefer to read steamy sex scenes, and not to like, go on and on and on about it, but like, I just think it's really fun. Like,
yeah.
It's just super fun to like read about people like feeling super attracted to each other and like wanting to rip their clothes off. And
Yes.
I don't know, like what are some romance books or book stories of yours that you like that have the good steamy sex in them?
Well, I was always really into Christina Lauren. And
Yeah.
I think in terms of sex scenes, those are the ones that really pop to me. So my first, beyond 50 Shades, I always cite Beautiful Bastard as really my like hook into an addiction to romance novels. So I was not sneaking at a teenage age. I was reading like teen love stories, like, I don't know, Sweet Valley and things like that. But no, Beautiful Bastard was definitely, and that is a spicy book. Now, in terms of like Office Place and consent and everything nowadays, it's a little bit behind. But Christina Lauren, they write really great spicy scenes. Both
Yeah.
they can be like, because their dialogue is super funny, but then the passion is super hot, and that's true of both the Beautiful series, because I tore through the whole thing, and then also their Wild Seasons series. So those books, and I like it too because it features multiple sex scenes, which is something else that I like, because I think that when you see that happening, you're seeing characters building a relationship together. And I think that each scene sort of deepens the understanding and the intimacy between the characters. So it's both like really fun and sexy to read, but it's also like a good way of building the plot for me. What about you? What are your steamy people?
Yeah, well, first I love Christina Lauren too. I'm a fan of their books too, so I totally agree with you there. But I also really like Stephanie Simpson. She's a British contemporary romance author. She writes a lot about kink and consent in her romances, and she is a writer who has multiple sex scenes and love scenes in her stories, which I absolutely adore. Like you said, like I just like the more the better, honestly.
Right.
But her book, A Good Night's Sleep, is one of my absolute favorites. It's an enemies to lovers romance, and it deals a lot with kink and exploring like what exactly the characters like to do sexually. And there's a lot of shame in, like one of the characters has to deal with, previous partners shaming him for his kink preferences. So it's a really nice, like informative, but also like really hot story about like not being ashamed about what gets you off. And as long as you are with the right person and you communicate and you talk about your boundaries and what you're comfortable with, it can be as hot as you want it to be. So I love that book.
Yeah.
Favorites. And then I also really like The Only Question That Matters by J.L. Peridot. And that's a sci-fi romance. It's so good. And it's kind of this, it's just this romance about these strangers who like, they know each other because they go to the same like fitness class on this spaceship on their way to this distant planet. And like they have this hookup the night before they dock on the planet and leave each other forever. And it's just like, and you don't think that like a stranger's hookup is going to be so emotional and meaningful and sexy, but it absolutely is. Like, it's incredible. And she writes these like long sex scenes that are super hot, but they're also like poetic. It's amazing.
Yeah, I just finished her book. It starts with a kiss.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'll say even the solo, the masturbation scene, and the fantasies that she was narrating for us, I was like, woohoo, okay. I loved it. I thought it was great. Yeah, absolutely. So we also have sex in our books.
Yes.
And those scenes are always, it's funny to me. It's always the thing that people really want to talk about when they ask me about writing it and different things. So this is the part where we're going to talk about writing those infamous sex scenes.
Yay!
You go first. You just finished a revision anyway. Talk about your process. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's obviously, I think writing can be very technical, obviously, but I think for me, a lot of my writing comes from how I feel. And that can be really hard to like explain, like, oh, I do this, 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 and this. And then after I'm done with this, I do this. That's not really how I approach a sex scene. And this is going to sound probably overly simplistic and weird, but I just imagine what would be hot and sexy in a scenario between characters, and I write it down. And it sounds overly simple, and it's weird because I feel like there are a lot of people who say like, oh, I don't like writing sex scenes, or it's really hard, or I don't know how anyone can do that. But I think it's like what I love writing the most, and it's the easiest thing to write for me. Like I have such a hard time writing other elements of the story sometimes, but like sex is just so easy for me to write about because I find it so fun.
Uh-huh.
And exciting, but like as sex should be fun and exciting. But I guess what I try to do when I'm writing a sex scene is I try to keep the level of like tension there. So there's always going to be some bit of like banter between the characters. I try to remember, this is going to sound weird, but I try to remember like sensory stuff, like sights, sounds, smells, tastes, not like in a perverted way, but like, but you know what I mean? Like, but what the character looks like, oh my gosh, he looks hot when he takes off his shirt, and wow, he has like 8 ab muscles. That's fantastic. Or like, he smells like sweat, and his sweat doesn't smell disgusting. It smells hot. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, does that?
Yes, I do.
Right. Yeah. So, and also there's always, I mean, there should be an element of consent in any romance that anyone writes. But like for me, I like to try to put into a sex scene like some sort of like it's sometimes it's in the banter that they're engaging in, or like when they're taking their clothes off, but like an element where you know that both characters want to be here and that they're both consenting to this act. And you can make consent and permission hot. Like sometimes it's like, oh, does this feel good? Or tell me if you like this, or like I love it when you do this, or like just all sorts of affirmations to show that the characters are like actively enjoying this and actively want this. Yeah, so that's kind of how I go about it. I mean, I don't really have like a guideline or like a beat sheet. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Thank you. That I follow when I write a sex scene. I just like, I feel like when I'm at the point where I'm writing the characters having sex, I know them pretty well. So I just kind of like let it flow out of me in a way. Not really, it's not clinical. It's not, for me, it's not clinical. And it's not instructional. It's more like emotional. And yeah, I guess that's just the best way I can explain it. Sorry if that sounds convoluted, but
no, it doesn't. It makes sense to me. It's funny. I'm really giggling at this idea that there's like this form sheet and you just sub out some names. Copy, paste, done. Yeah, no, because like totally it is about being in the character's mind. Mm-hmm. And it's about like knowing who these characters are, what brought them there, and then therefore moving from that to what they would do. And yeah, I don't think it can be formulaic at all, even if you're working with the same characters or if you're working with a new set of characters in a different book. It's funny how intimate it becomes for you because you're really becoming these characters and expressing what they're wanting and needing in those moments from each other. It's also interesting too, I guess for me, is like I have a series of books, so I have a lot of different characters, and knowing in each one kind of the things that are sort of their custom things, and the way in which they approach intimacy is interesting. So, like for example, Nick is really good with his mouth, and so that's kind of a signature thing for him. Whereas, I'm trying to think, like, I don't know, Ben and Celeste is just very much like this merging of two individuals. So it's always, like you said, it's just always this really like, these are the characters and this is what they're going to want right now. And then just getting into it. I love it too. It's probably my favorite part. I'm trying to remember the first time I actually wrote a sex scene, and because it was years ago that I wrote Not Suitable for Work. And I kind of remember getting to that moment. It was kind of like the edge of a cliff. It was kind of like, do a couple light stretches and be like, all right, here we go. And then I remember when I was done writing it, I was like, whew, okay, that was fun.
Right.
But
yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny though, because I was having this conversation with another one of our friends who's also an author, but he writes fantasy novels or a
Mhm.
fantasy novel. And we were talking about fight scenes because he was writing a battle scene. And I brought up the fact that fighting and fucking are a similar type of narrative style, because
Mhm.
the pitfall that you have in it is that you are running the risk of overusing the same verbs again and again. So like if you're fighting someone, you're going to punch them, you're going to maybe like use a sword or whatever you're doing, but the motions are going to be the same, and you really have to work on that when you're writing sex as well. There's only so many times you can use the word thrust, lick, or suck in a
Yes.
paragraph, and then it's too much. So it's really funny to go back and edit it, because then you're like, oh no, I have to change this up somehow. Because when you really kind of step outside and look at it, it is kind of a repetitive action in a way. But that's
Yeah.
a good thing. It's like
Right.
you want it to be repetitive because it's satisfying, but at the
Right.
same time. But no, I loved that conversation, because it was like, yeah, no, actually, that's really true. Fighting and sex are very similar in terms of narrative style. You got to watch those reps.
That is brilliant. And like, I don't write a whole lot of fight scenes. I don't know if I've ever written a fight scene, so I can't even really say I know what that's like. But like, yes, that makes total sense given the comparison. Yeah, like so funny because they shouldn't be the same.
Well, the words you're using are different, but
Right.
it is kind of funny. I have only really written one fight scene, which is going to be in book 3. But
Oh, yeah.
oh, see what I did there? But yeah, yeah, no, I can totally see how that's similar. I think it's so funny. But the one thing I'm going to say about writing sex, it is fun.
Yes.
Sex is fun as long as you said, it's consensual.
Right.
And I'm completely with that. I do the same thing. Like there's the scene in book 2 where he says, "Do you trust me? Do you trust me to stop the second you say?" There's always that consent. But
Mhm.
as fun as sex is to write and read, I have to go on record right now and say it is not autobiographical. Official statement right there. The mystery is clear. Because I don't know about you, Sarah, but so many people have asked me, they're like, so how much of this is based on you? And I'm like, guys, let's take a beat.
Right.
This is a fiction story. I mean, have I had sex? Yes. But but that does not mean that I'm narrating out my personal life in other people just under character names. So no, this is original inspiration for me. It is not an autobiography.
Yes, I'm thank you for saying that, first of all, because I get the same thing. I think people come up to me or we like they make the assumption like, oh, so like this is what you and your husband do. I'm like, no, one, first of all, like, and maybe it's because I'm a very private person,
Mm-hmm.
my real life. Like I would never write about any sexual thing I've done other than like you said, I have had sex. So obviously like that's the commonality here, but that's about it. Like I'm never going to write something personal that I've experienced with like my partner into like a medium that like multiple people are going to consume. Like that's fine if you want to do that. Like that's awesome if you want to do that. But like for me, like that's really private and I don't want to do that. So
Absolutely.
like I get people asking about like because there are a couple like steamy scenes in my book Faker and they're like, oh, so you did that? I'm like, no, I didn't do that. It's a made up situation. These people are not real. I am not the main character. Like I don't, it's weird because like that's not a concept that's difficult for me to grasp. And I don't
Right.
assume that like every person's writing is their experience unless they like stipulate it. So like, oh, this
Right.
actually happened to me. So yeah, it's weird. It's so weird when people are like, oh wow, that's a little crazy. I'm like, that's not me. That's this made up person who does
Yes.
this. It's exactly what you say. It's like the characters and their story. It's not my story. I'm just telling the character's story. That's,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's like the best way I can explain it. Also, it's super embarrassing when people assume that or reference that, because like my family members have read my book, and I don't want them thinking that like, oh, this is my sister or my like niece or whatever. Like, no, please don't ever.
Yep.
I don't know if you get like in that headspace when you're like thinking,
I
oh, my
do.
grandpa's reading this, fantastic, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. My 80-year-old uncle, who is an amazing human being, he read it, and when he called me to tell me about his feedback, he very genteelly did not mention the sex scenes, and he
Oh.
just went on about how much he enjoyed the book, and I was like, okay, thank God. Thank you for not bringing that up, Uncle Gerald. I appreciate that. It was awesome though. Like I was so excited that he read it, but then also too, yeah, that part of me is like, oh God.
Right.
But yeah, no, like again, like you said, like super respect if you want to, if that's like somebody else's method.
Yes.
But yeah, like I wouldn't assume that a crime novelist was writing about, the madcap adventures he has been on or she has been on. So like in the same way, it's like these are my characters and this is what they're doing, and like it very much is their story. And yeah, it's not like thinly veiled, Skye's personal adventures under another name, like not at all, at all. In fact, like I completely agree with what you're saying. Like those are my experiences and I'm happy to have shared them with someone.
Yes.
And I do not need to share them with the world. I can share this like super beautiful narrative of fiction. And I love doing that too. I'm proud to write sex scenes. It's like, but yeah, no, that's not me. And I'm okay with that not being me. I have my life and my characters have theirs. And to that point too, like in my books, like the sex is very idealized. Like it's never kind of, well, it's occasionally kind of awkward. Like there'll be moments of frustration, but just the ease with which characters merge on their first encounter and things like that. Like, of course that's, sort of idealized and shined up for fiction. Like you want it to be brilliant and exciting and escapist fantasy kind of things at the same time. So yeah, like it's meant to feel like you're meant to feel like you're part of the character stories, but at the same time too, yeah, fiction, all good fun.
Yes, I completely agree. That's exactly how I feel. I guess I just feel like there are awkward moments sometimes, but this is a romance novel. It's fantasy. It's meant to be fun and pleasurable and escape from real life. And I think enough people have had crappy, underwhelming sex in real life. So let's read about some good sex that will satisfy you, I guess is what I'm trying to do here.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the fun. Like it's great fun. And I love to do it. Like I love to write these stories and to bring this into the world. Cause like you said, I mean, it should be fun. It should be pleasurable. It should be consensual. And it should be something that we can enjoy both in real life and in story. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's wonderful to be able to talk about. And I think it's great that we've been able to just sit here and talk so freely about it here because it's fun to talk about.
I totally agree. I could talk about this all day, every day with romance writers, not like with rando disgusting dudes. No. You know what I mean? Like some people think like, oh, then you want to talk. Like, no, I don't want to talk to you about this.
Right. Please don't slide into our DMs with weird comments. You can slide into our DMs with questions about any of our books or anything like that. But we don't need your personal fantasies played out. Thank you. Keep those for yourself and your consenting partner. Cheers. Thanks much.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But oh my, that one was good for me. Was it good for you, Sarah?
Hell yeah, it was good for me.
Indeed. Well, that was episode 3 of the Quick and Dirty Romance podcast. And like I just said, if you want to ask us a question about anything we've discussed in this episode or our books or anything else about romance or being an author, feel free to DM us on social media, but do keep your personal fantasies in your own bedroom. You can find us on Twitter at Quick and Dirty Rom and on Instagram at Quick and Dirty Romance. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram, both at writer Skye McD.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at author Sarah S. If you want to check out our books, one more time, they are Not Suitable for Work and Off the Record by Skye McDonald. and Faker by Sarah Smith.
And as a side note, you can also access purchase of all of our books on our Instagram and Twitter handles via our link tree. So that's easy for you to get to. But thank you so much for listening, guys. And to close out today, I'm going to leave you with my quote because it's super applicable here. Darlings, be good. And if you can't be good, always, always be careful.
Bye. We'll see you next time.
Bye.